Okay, we're deep in the fourth Perek about the Bederach Knias Zahirus. We mentioned that the Shlemei Adas, they look for Zahirus and they're careful in all their actions and always considering what the Derech HaTorah is and how to get to it and checking themselves and making the strategies to get there, as we've been saying, is because that's the only thing that's really worth it. Ani Kirvas Elokim Litov. We started in the last session with the Pchusim. Let's quickly review that the Pchusim, those have a less clarity in what it's all about. Let's say in a ruchnistic level, their head is not as screwed on as tightly. So they have to work with covenant. Now, this is really an incredible thing because it's quite a sophisticated argument, as we'll see and as we've seen, that you have to look at yourself honestly and say, look, covet moves me. And that's the recognition. What does it mean that covet moves me? Things like honor, recognition from others, awards, credit, a plaque. Imagine what other people think. All that whole family, you have to admit to yourself that moves you. Okay, that's the first step. And the next thing is you have to understand that use that idea about what you're going to feel like in the future, in the next world, when this happens, all right? How can you, it's going to hurt you. You're going to see all these people who are on a lower level than you, theoretically, in this world, that you were working all the time to get ahead of them, and now they're ahead of you. That's going to bother you. Before going deeper into that, I just wanted to share a ha'ara here. I have notes from somebody, Moshe Tzuriel, who was once, I'm not sure where he is today. I hope he's alive and well. There's a tremendous Bucky. He has a lot of Sfarim, shows massive Bekias, so I have notes of his on the Mesilas Yesharim. So he said it's interesting that he dafka starts here, not in the Sulam, going up, but he starts from the Shlemei Das first, right? Why is that? Why did he start with the Shlemei Das? Why did he start with the lowest level, and then move up, the end of the Perek? So he says, try, Efemod. Meaning, maybe the Ramchal taught us about the Shlemei Adas because he was saying that maybe you're not a Shlemei Adas exactly, but give it a try. Then try the lower level, and you might be matzliach in the mahalach of the Shlemei Adas. Meaning, the Ramchal is trying to catch someone who wouldn't necessarily perceive themselves as a Shlemei Adas. But look, the first thing Mesilas Yesharim said was for the Shlemei Adas. Let's see if that works for me. And I guess it works for me. So I guess I do have a certain level of Shleimus. Very nice idea. That's why maybe the Ramchal started with the Shlemei Adas, how they approach things first. Okay, but we're not in the Shlemei Adas now. We spent a lot of time in that in earlier sessions. Now we're in the Pchusim. Binei. That's where we begin. Yesh me'apsoim. They're foolish people. Important. Petty yamin l'chol davar. A petty believes anything. Pitui. Someone gets sucked into something. They just want to make their life easy. Shomer. Why should we work so hard? Like liyagea means to work hard. Lo niga lehevel l'rik. Right? It's enough for less. I want to make sure I don't get out of Gehenna. And we could add that a person says, look, so let's make sure to get out of Gehenna. So I want to point out first off, it's not so posh to make sure you're I say to Mr. Pessy, how are you so sure you're not going to be in Gehenna? I mean, right, we don't like to imagine that, nor do I, and I don't wish on anybody. But as I say, who knows? So this Pessy is sure he doesn't have to worry about that. So he said, okay, I'll work X amount, get out of Gehenna. We have to get the best seats, right? And they continue with this thinking. So we won't have the chelik gadol. Enough, we'll have a chelik katan. So it's amazing who we're talking about. We're talking about someone who believes in a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Let's just get this clear, right? He believes in a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He believes in Torah, he believes in Chazal, he believes in Gehenna, believes in Gan Eden, he believes in all that. And he's got some level of clarity about himself, so he thinks that he'll get out of Gehenna. And that person is still thinking, it's interesting, if I was on that level already, if someone's on that level, you think, oh, then he gets it. So he gets it, but he says, okay, but I'll have a chelik katan olam haba. It's very interesting, right? That's enough. So I'm going to work a whole life to get a better seat. Incredible. That's what they're saying. So now, as I said, this person's argument is quite a full argument. He has all those beliefs which I mentioned. So I think in our language, that's not the way we speak so much today. First, as I've said before, I'm talking about the general vibe, my understanding of the tzibur, where people are at, for whatever it's worth, and of course I could always be wrong and very wrong, but try my best, is that we think less in terms of Gan Eden and Gehenna, etc. Right? And that's a good thing, it's just a practical thing. So we have to try to translate into today's Pesi. How does today's Pesi think? Why be so frum? Don't overdo it. Chill out. Now, that of course doesn't mean that those are not, don't overdo it and chill out could be good words for someone who's too nervous, too uptight, certainly obsessive compulsive, and taking or living obsessive compulsive. But sometimes I think we turn ourselves into P'tayim using those arguments and thinking that it applies, right? Meaning, Ruchnius is a heavy thing. We made this point before. When you learn Mesilas Yesharim, and you learn really any sefer was written by someone of full Yirah Shamayim, who was realistic about the world and understood what the world's about, life is serious. I was just reading about Rebbe Berea David. Someone wrote a very nice tribute to her. Interesting Dafke, a woman that seems to have been to BJJ, which for those who know is like the frum of the frum. That's really, very, very, very frum, as you would say. And she called herself a modern Orthodox feminist. And I saw the institutions she was associated with were quite far on the left. And but she had learned BJJ, obviously in her youth. And she was writing this beautiful tribute about Rebbetzin David, Berea David, her Footner's daughter, Footner's only child. Sadly, she didn't have any children, so that means her Footner's line on a biological level, unfortunately, sadly, stopped. She also passed away. Her husband, Rav Yonason David, is still there, but of course her Footner lives on, and she does with her thousands of students and his thousands and thousands of students, etc. But anyway, so he says that Rebbetzin David had no place for silliness. Rejuvenation, taking a break, of course, is needed. But silliness, not taking life seriously, that didn't exist by her. Like, what is silliness? What is that? Right? The people covered Rosh. She expressed it very, very well. But that's the idea here, right? So that life is serious. So these people have this. So we have to turn this argument into the way it would speak to us in our Yetzer Hara, right? Where's our Yetzer Hara? Our Yetzer Hara isn't to take a vacation, to take a break, to not get too. Those are good things, but when it turns into philosophy in our heads, that life is just to take it easy. Chilling out is like a davar kaddish b'fnei atzmo, right? Going out to eat is a chashuv thing b'fnei atzmo. So then we're forgetting what the pros door is and we're forgetting what's the pros door and what's the main thing. So that's the argument that Rabbeinu is saying, and he's going to continue with his answer. But first, before he gives his answer, which we'll find out about in the next session, I just want to point that out, that our Peti today speaks in a different language, but let's make sure to hear the ruach, the spirit of what the Mesilas Yesharim is saying, the ruach of the argument, and not necessarily the specific words, because the words might not be our words, but the language certainly is a language sometimes which is in our Yetzer Hara, in our heads, and certainly by those sometimes around us who, not meaning to be negative, but can, very often you have a child who becomes more frum or more excited, and sometimes the parents can point out there's something unhealthy in the growth, but sometimes just because the parents don't appreciate the seriousness that this young man or young lady has learned to take life, and appreciate that life is something which is more serious than they see it. And the reason the parents don't see it, or sometimes even, to be honest, educators that were in the past of the student, is because they're not on the madrega, not because they're offering a healthy, I want to make sure my child is psychologically healthy and not overdoing it and doesn't overdo it. No, it's not coming from this. It's coming because they don't appreciate the goal, the way the young chanicha, child or young adult or even older adult sees things. And then we always have to be honest with ourselves where the arguments are coming from and checking ourselves. What is it? I'll add one more thing. Sometimes we're threatened. It's very interesting in the world of Abbas Yisrael. Sometimes people have like so much patience for anybody to the left of them, but anybody to the right of them, that must be a fanatic. Why? Do you think there's no one who takes life more seriously than you do? I think there's definitely people who take life more seriously than I do. I can deal with that. We can and understand. It's not. I was reading about the Skver Rebbe. It's amazing. Skver Rebbe spends millions of dollars for his Hasidus dealing with the technology's dangers. Incredible. Now I'm speaking to you on a smartphone. You very likely listening on a smartphone. My smartphone is Mugan, what we call Mugan, and has a good company, Hadron, etc. But that's not enough for Square, and I appreciate that. I don't look say, oh, they're fanatic, they're crazy. I got it exactly right. They're wrong. They're taking life with a certain level of seriousness. Now, that doesn't mean everybody who has a phone is this, of course, and everybody who doesn't have a phone is that. Obviously, we're not saying that, but it's to be able to smell the good that's in another tzibur, and realize sometimes that they're not wrong by taking. Certainly, it's at least it's shimpanum matar. It's at least elu de'elu, and sometimes maybe they got it, maybe they're right. I'll tell you, just a personal thing. I was feeling to myself like, wow, this Hasidus is taking care of its people. It means this Rebbe sees a danger, what he perceives as a danger to his people, and he's spending, it's an incredible amount of efforts, giving out mezuzahs and writing Sifrei Torah and all around technology. So it's not necessarily the community that we would live in, but the fact that he's protecting his people and caring for them was very meaningful to me. So we always have to be honest with our arguments. That's the point at the end of the day. Where are arguments coming from? Or is it coming from a critique that we see something negative in someone or a tzibur sometimes, which might be true? Or is it that just they're making us feel guilty or they're being more makbid about something than we are, etc. And that's really where it's coming from, and or they maybe have more clarity about some point of what is shown that we don't have. So Hashem should help us not to be patayim.